LinkedIn's so slow.
It's so much fun. We just get to, we just get to wait. Let's see.
I can appreciate that Riverside is letting us both be producers today, though.
Oh, is it? Did it let us
Yeah, I
both log
didn't
in?
join on the
That's
guest
kind of nice.
link, so
Okay, let's see. LinkedIn is connecting. Da, da. All right, time to go live on LinkedIn. Maybe. Here we go. All right. Well, we are here again with Lunchable Go-to-Market Ops. I am Sarah Lane-Hawn, and with me,
Danielle Urban.
and we are bringing you HubSpot grab and go tips in 15 minutes or less each day. Today, we are wrapping up our first week focus on attribution. So, we've touched on a lot of topics around what it means to even think through attribution, what types of activities are feasible to capture, when you should be using influenced revenue versus true created revenue. Um, we've also talked about getting buy-in. What do executives care about if you are pitching, building a new attribution model? And then today it brings us to where people try to start the conversation but should actually end it, which is which model should we use? Danielle, this is a loaded question. So can you kind of unpack it a little bit? When we say what attribution model should we use? What are we kind of evaluating?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this in our influence versus actual conversation because what you're counting and when is basically what feeds that is your model. Like
Yeah.
ultimately, once you make those decisions, that is what you build your model on. And so a lot of times we talk about first touch or multi touch and last touch. When you get deep in the weeds on multi touch, that's where you get a lot of these different models that are weighting things in different ways. So you can do like a totally custom model where you decide what interactions should weight higher, which a lot of people should want to do and do want to do, where you have like an in-person meeting or a demo call, and that should be weighted much higher than like they registered for your webinar, didn't show up. Like those are interactions that are counted as activities in the same way in HubSpot, but in your world and your selling process mean very different things. And so how you weight that should play into your model. But if you're really looking at out of the box models and the things that people typically talk about, you have all the lettered models. You have the J model, you have the W model, you have all of the ones that have time decrements associated and sort of what activities are happening when. And so if you have HubSpot Enterprise, you can start to look at those models and kind of click through what they are. But again, when you're using the out of the box solution, it's not accounting for the thing that you want them to do or like the thing that you know is going to convert them higher.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there are a lot of limitations and like what model you choose and how you build it out and how you test against it and iterate can really just depend on what your goals are. We've been saying that all week.
Yeah. Well, and the complexity of layering those different things on top of each other, right? Like at the base level, you're thinking multi touch, linear attribution, all activities weighted the same.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's your most simplistic from multi-touch attribution. But even within that, you've already had to decide which activities we're going to actually measure, which ones are we going to count when we're doing the revenue attribution in terms of when did they happen along a
Yeah.
client life cycle, whose activities, is it everybody or is it just people associated with the deal? Like those are already four really key questions you've had to answer before we even get into the actual analytic model that we're going to use for interpretation of the data.
Right.
And then once you get into that piece of it, you've got um, as you're saying, you've got the actual weighting of the activity. How do the activities compare to one another? And do you want to give some actually more credit, even if they're done the same number of times? So you've got that, the weighting. Then you have the shape of when in the life cycle did it occur?
Mm-hmm.
And are there specific milestone steps that
Yeah.
should be weighted more? So time and milestone specific in addition to activity specific weighting. And then you have the basically time impact of like as things get further along, how do we degrade those? And maybe those don't count as much. So there's basically three levels from what I'm seeing that like impact then what that model choice is going to end up being. So how do we choose? What do we build or what do we start looking at if we're trying to do the analysis?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this when we were bringing up lead scoring earlier this week, because that can actually stand as a blueprint for how you start to build this attribution model, especially for top of funnel, because you've already put that work in. You've already determined what's significant. You should probably go back and check and make sure that's real and that those significant activities are actually converting into deals and revenue down the road. But then from that point on, you can just sort of continue that funnel mapping and that journey mapping to see what those milestones are. They might even map to your stage gate. So you probably have a lot of the basis of what you need to build this out, and just make sure it's accurate. This is a great time to step back and assess that and then start to fit those pieces together. So, like, how long is your sales cycle? Shameless plug for my new Looker dashboard that you can buy on my website. You can see how long people sit in each life cycle stage from a contact basis. And then start to dig in, like, what are the activities that are moving people from one stage to the next. But I'm getting pretty far down the rabbit hole on this. It's just easy to
No, no,
do.
I think that's good because one of the questions that I was actually asked today from somebody who was looking at attribution modeling was they were looking at the output of of the results. They were looking at the revenue, and they just said, for me to be able to take action on this, I need to know what questions I'm answering. Like,
Yeah.
I they're not an analyst. They're not going to go dig through all the numbers and like ask a question and then go find the best way to answer it. They want to know, like, what does this dashboard answer? What do I use it for? And I think that is for us operations people like a really good kind of wake up call and reminder that while we look at it the other way and go, somebody asked a question,
Mhm.
I'm going to go find the way to answer it. When we're building a system, it should work the other way and it should be delivered in a way where they can say, this answers this question and I use it
Right.
in this purpose. And I think the models have a lot to do with that. Like, I think when we're looking at ROI,
Mhm.
having somewhat of a linear base, multi-touch model, I
Mhm.
think makes a lot of sense because you've got a very clean, crisp view of like everything being weighted equally,
Yeah.
every touch point mattering. What did it look like? And from there you can start to critique, does that even make sense from a financial
Yeah.
perspective? Like, we don't spend hardly anything to create our blog, where you spend a lot when we do an in-person event. Okay, I do want to weight those activities separately. Or, hey, the way that we're marketing our business, all of our top of funnel activities are extremely costly, but all of our nurture activities are automated. We don't invest a lot of money in it. We have a really great throughput, at that point. And so you may want to weight your early life cycle activities heavier so that you're reflecting the investment in the way that you credit the revenue. So I think it depends so much on like how you're doing your marketing for your company, where you're investing the most really financially in the
Mhm.
channels. Um, but also a lot of people still, their initial is to ask for a W model of like what originated the contact, what made it, marketing qualified or sales qualified, and then what was the last thing that they did before an actual meeting happened or an opportunity was created. And they want to know those three major touch points. But that to me is still like very hard to get to and not necessarily super truthful.
Mhm. Yep.
Because what's going to go in those places is going to be just wherever you capture it before
Yep.
a meet. So, like, how do you book the majority of your meetings? Is it an SDR reaching out, or is it people coming to your site and filling out a form? If it's on your site, the last touch is always going to be like direct, indirect,
DR's calendar.
referral,
Yeah.
right? Like, Or if you're doing it from your SDRs or reaching out and booking the meetings, it's always going to be an outbound touch point as your last one. So like, does it really tell us anything, or is that just like, yes, this is our process, we're following our SOPs?
Yeah. No, I think you bring up such a good point on like what is the question that you're answering? Because if you need to look at it from an ROI perspective and you're looking at, allocating budget for your marketing mix next year, you want to figure out what is the ROI for each of these channels. But when you're looking at that ROI, it's like, let's look at that ROI against the various milestones. So HubSpot's reports, which is why I pulled up this screen share, give you that contact attribution, the deal create attribution, and the revenue create attribution. This is an enterprise demo portal. So you've got all of the options. I'm pretty sure you only get contact create at the pro level.
Yeah, go for
Um,
it.
yeah, so it gives you some like top of funnel visibility, but not further down the funnel. And obviously, there are limitations with all of this because HubSpot only knows what you give it. So if you're doing a lot of in person events and you don't have a platform hooked up to HubSpot, or you're just like importing and you don't have a system to track what those imports are and how they map to your activities, you're going to totally lose that. And then HubSpot, of course, favors their own activities that they capture over, anything else that you're building. So you then have to turn around and build that structure and that labeling back into this report,
Yep.
which is not always easy. So in here we get our various attribution models that HubSpot has for you out of the box. Full path is a new one that I haven't explored yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, so you get first interaction, which is like the very first time that someone has interacted with that one person has interacted with your brand, could have even been like an anonymous blog visit. That's your first touch attribution. Last interaction is the last credit or last interaction that led to a closed one deal. So the last thing they did before they closed that deal, which might have been like a demo meeting. Like you
Mm,
might have that set up and that's your deal create marker. And of course that could have been SDR outreach. That could have been like a web dev or web conversion. Like there's any ways that you could measure that. Full
right.
path gives 22.5% of credit to the first interaction, 22.5% to the interaction that created the contact, 22.5 to the last interaction that created the deal, and 22.5 to the interaction that closed the deal. Then it gives
Hmm.
the remaining 10% evenly across all interactions. I kind of like that.
Yeah,
That's a cool one. I haven't seen that yet.
like a WV model.
Yeah.
So you got 4 touch points instead
Mix
of
them all together.
yeah.
Um, J-shaped is more credit to the later things. Inverse J is more credit to the earlier things.
Mhm.
U-shaped is more credit to the first and
Getting
last, and
in
then maybe
last.
they just kind of messed around in the middle there and got a little bit of credit for that.
Yep.
W, just we can just pick a letter and make a model for it.
Yeah, well, and I do love that in the enterprise, platform, like, these are, attribution reports. So you can
Mhm.
create multiple. You can create one that looks at, a linear versus looking at your W model. And I think that's really nice if you have people who can do the analytics.
Yeah.
Again, like if you're somebody who's digging in and finding what it's telling you, it's great to be able to have that flexibility. If you're someone who your team needs to be given the format and told, this is what we're using it for, this is all that it means, anything outside of those questions, we need to go back and like reassess. Then I think having something standardized can be very useful.
Yeah.
Um, the other piece that I run into is people asking about um, kind of how much data needs to be in there for it to be meaningful. And I think that is important because, again, no attribution setup is perfect. You're never going to catch every interaction, right? Like you
Mhm.
mentioned, an anonymous blog visit. Like, yeah, if we caught it and cookied
Right.
it and found out who it was and got it associated,
Right.
like, sure, a lot of those times isn't going to happen. Some of those times is going to happen. And so none of the channels are going to actually capture 100% of their impact. So this is still just directional no matter what, no matter how thorough we are, it is
Yeah.
directional. And I think at a certain point, like we have to accept that. We have to be able to recognize that, yeah, if we don't have a ton of data in here where we don't have a ton of contacts moving through during a specific time frame, then this information is probably not great for us to use to make huge decisions.
Mhm.
It gives us more of a customer journey like understanding of that
Yeah.
individual contact, right? So, any other caveats before we end today and kind of wrap up our attribution um, week?
Yeah, I think your reminder that, like, it's never perfect, it's never gonna be the end all be all, perfect model that answers everything is just so good to keep in mind. You can spend years trying to perfect all of the inputs and the numbers and where it comes from, and you're inevitably going to miss something or
Yeah.
not be able to capture something. Like, spoiler alert, we have no idea who's really watching these videos because LinkedIn as a platform is kind of trash. We love it, but it's not great for streaming. So we have no idea
Commenting trash.
on LinkedIn. I know. Like, hit the like button if you're listening because we don't know. But this, we still value this type of activity. We know that it's, serving some purpose for us. So, like, we will never be able to capture the influence of us as influencers doing this video on
Right.
our consulting businesses, but we still see the value and know that it's feeding in somewhere. So, good luck. We're all trying our best.
We're all doing our best. I love that. All right. Well, that's it for attribution week. You can always message myself or Danielle if you have any one off questions or things that you'd like to discuss. Next week, we're going to jump into lead scoring, and not just lead scoring, but how lead scoring in total can be used across your company for various purposes, can help create alignment between sales and marketing. So I'm excited to dive into the weeds there, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye. All right, you have to jump.
I do.